Welcome to Leadership Roundtable with John Samuel.
Two weeks back, we did learn quite a lot from the life of Joseph. We learned from Joseph three things in 3 weeks. Connect with your work with God's work. We also learned the principles of our career, the work. And the second week, we learned about the principles of integrity and accountability from the life of Joseph, where he stood by very clear principles of integrity and honesty, where he said, how can I do this wicked thing and sin against God? And the third week, we talked about the principles of reconciliation and being a blessing. These are the three different things that we learned. I think last week also, last time we almost learned around 12 principles of reconciliation and being a blessing. And one of the clear things that we said is your vocation in life is where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest needs. Please understand your job is very important. It's where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. That's how you need to take your job. That's how Joseph undertook his vocation, where he felt that this will bring him greatest joy. Whether he was in the Potiphar's house, whether he was inside the prison, and later on whether he was the prime minister of Egypt, he found that his vocation was his greatest joy. And secondly, in all the three places we find that his job was meeting the world's greatest needs. He was inside the prison. And the needs of those two people, when they came in, he was willing to meet them. And same thing when he went and took the responsibility as the prime minister. He was meeting the world's greatest needs. At that time, the famine. The greatest need at that time was that 7 years of utter famine. And he was the one who managed the entire thing. We learned around 12 things, but I will only talk about one or two things. One is law of goodness. He was a person filled with goodness. Just Desmond Tutu says the bishop was given the Nobel Peace Prize. Do your little bit of good where you are. It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world against his own brothers who were doing so much of damage in his life. He was exceedingly good to his family. The law of goodness. We also studied about the law of forgiveness. He was willing to forgive them. And we learned that forgiveness is, what is the word that we said? Forgiveness is mandatory. Forgiveness is mandatory in Christian life. Please understand. Forgiveness is not a choice. If you don't forgive, he says, I will not forgive your sins. And in one of the beautiful parables, Jesus Christ says, hey, I have forgiven you enough and you are not willing to forgive. And the kind of punishment that was meted to him is enormous. Forgiveness is mandatory. Whereas in the world, generally, if you say that I am going to forgive somebody, yes, it is something extra that you are doing. But please understand, in the Christian world, forgiveness is not extra. Forgiveness is basic. And if you are not willing to forgive, and then again we said, the next is from the law of forgiveness, we move to another law. What is the next law from the law of forgiveness? You recall what was the next law?
Law of respect.
Law of respect, yes. Law of respect, that's how he was being respectful to everybody, yes.
Law of reconciliation.
Law of reconciliation. The difference between the forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness is between you and God. Please understand. Whereas the reconciliation is between you and the other person. And Jesus Christ says, before you come to worship, before you come on a Sunday to worship me, go and get yourself reconciled with your brothers. So the law of reconciliation was there, the law of forgiveness he taught, the law of respect, the law of generosity. The law of generosity that we also learned. And then we said the law of goodness. You recall what about Gandhiji? What was the thing that was written in the book?
I was a good boy, but not a bright boy.
Yes, I was a good boy. I was not a bright boy. Doesn't see bright boy. No, most of us tend to think that bright boy is the only thing. Yes, brightness is also required. But the fundamental thing is good boy. If you are not a good boy and you are a bright boy, what's the use? Today, in the society, we have a lot of bright boys who are spoiling the systems. Brightness plus goodness is okay, but only brightness without being good, I think that's a dangerous thing in the society. That's one of the reasons I'm saying, yes, there are quite a few of you who are writing the civil service exams. Yes, you are bright. I'm glad. If you're not bright, probably you'll not be able to make it. But because you're bright, you make it to the civil services is no relevance unless you're good. If you're good and you're also bright and you get into the civil service, you can transform the country. You're bright and you get into the civil services, you will, like all other people, probably you will also be involved in all kind of things which will really bring damage to the nation. So goodness, I think that's what we said. We need to be absolutely good. The law of goodness. And then the last one was God's perspective changes everything. It says, as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good.